Welcome to Fireside Giants, a featured podcast by Empire Sports Media. I'm your host, Alexander Wilson, and my co-hosts, Anthony Rivardo and Mike Iarapino. Give us a follow on Twitter if you haven't already, Alex Wilson ESM, Anthony_Rivardo, and Mike_NYY. Today we have another special guest on the channel, Will, aka Willie Receipts on Twitter. We're going to be talking Dave Gettleman and 2018 draft. He has a lot on his mind, and a lot of people have argued in the past, including myself, but we're here to squash any beef and have some fun and just really talk Giants football, because that's really what we love and what we want to do, and we just want to be successful again, and everyone has different ways to get to that point, and Dave Gettleman has those himself. We saw him release a few quotes today on the status of the team and what they're doing, so we're going to kind of go over that, just the last few years and how everything is progressing. But first, how's everybody doing?
Pretty good. It's not too bad in my area in South Florida, so I've just been staying inside and playing a lot of video games and talking to my friends through Xbox. That's about it. That's really all I can do, and obviously trying to get good grades on my online classes, but other than that, not much going on here.
Same, yeah. Pretty much the same.
Keeping busy, trying to stay focused. It's luckily healthy and glad to be here.
Absolutely. So we got a lot on our plate. And with the Giants kind of going through the motions at this point, everything's virtual. The NFL draft is coming up in less than 2 weeks, which is pretty exciting. The rumor mill is flowing, and everyone's on the offensive tackle or Isaiah Simmons side. But I kind of want to reflect back to 2018 and see kind of how we got here and where we are now, and if we could have been in a better place. And I'm sure we all think that, in hindsight is 2020, so we all know that things could have went differently. But Will, I want to ask you first and foremost, your opinion on 2018. Drafting Saquon Barkley, and how you think that's affected the team right now and where Gettleman and the team should be.
Well, I think, I think there are people off of Twitter who probably even know what my opinion is about the 2018 draft. I've been pretty abundantly clear. I wrote a long article. I'm not a writer myself, but I did write an article for a friend's blog in 2018 explaining my thoughts without any, negative opinion whatsoever about Saquon Barkley, the prospect. I think the question right now is it time to just move on and think about the present? And there's nothing that I see that really suggests that that's the case. I hate to say it. We still have the same general manager. We still have the same biggest holes. I retweeted Ryan Dunleavy from 2 years ago yesterday, who had said Daniel Jeremiah from Move the Sticks had said the Giants' two biggest holes in 2018 were offensive tackle and edge rusher. Where are we today? Where has that changed? We have the only potential tackle right now we have for the future. I think our favorite tackle for the future is probably Nick Gates, who was an undrafted free agent who missed all of 2018. It's hard to look at the needs that we have, see how it's going to be filled in a short time frame, see how difficult it is to trade out of number 4 when you have teams in front of you that have leverage, and not think about the time when we had the leverage and we could have set a clean course with a GM with no prior obligation. So I would argue that no, it's not too late. And I think 2018 was the biggest decision of my life, and I think it was the wrong one.
I feel that. And, reflecting back to 2018, it's pretty interesting to think, Quentin Nelson was picked only a few slots later, and look what the Colts are doing now. I mean, given Andrew Luck retiring is probably something nobody anticipated happening, but here we are with Saquon Barkley, and he was injured last season. Running backs are arguably the most injured position on any given football team, so giving a lot of money to him in a few years. Christian McCaffrey just landed $16 million per year today. So, in 2 years when Saquon Barkley's up for that new contract, we're looking at probably $18 to $20 million for a running back. So he has to show us that he's going to be that guy, because we're talking Jadeveon Clowney money at this point, like star pass rusher money for a running back who was injured for a good portion of 2019. We need to see some Christian McCaffrey type numbers, in the running game, in the passing game. That's kind of where my head is leaning offensive tackle now, because 1, you need to shore up Daniel Jones, and 2, you need to give Saquon Barkley those holes to run through. And like you said, Nick Gates is one of those players that the Giants need to step up. But actually, just a few minutes ago, Bobby Skinner from Talking Giants posted, he was like, Nick Gates, if you like this, you've been practicing snapping the football this year, so suggesting he would be playing center, and he liked the tweet. So I don't know if that's any indication of anything. Gettleman might be having at the micro level smoke screens going on here, but you really never know. And if he's practicing snapping footballs, it's probably an indication that he might be looking to make that transition to center, and his body frame suggests that he would be better there than tackle. And there's a lot of good tackle options. If they trade back, we have Wirfs, Jedrick Wills. There's a ton of good players there who I don't think are deserving to be at number 4 because a player like Isaiah Simmons is just so talented. But I think you trade back regardless and get a tackle, in my opinion.
That probably is the best thing right now. I think, taking a tackle based on the team needs, I've said it before, I love Isaiah Simmons, but based on what we have right now, especially signing Blake Martinez, who hopefully is more of the 2018 version, I think drafting an offensive tackle number 4 is the better idea. And then there's people that say, well, just take one later. But as I said before in a previous podcast, you're not going to get that level of player at number 36 or whatever it is, 99 in the third round that you will get at number 4. Like Jedrick Wills, Andrew Thomas, these are day one guys that are going to impact your roster week 1. But these other guys, Ezra Cleveland's and the Prince Tega Wanagos, whatever they are, those guys might be development projects, and I don't really trust them week 1, to be honest.
Right. And Will, what do you think they're going with this?
Yeah, I think that's all really fine. I think both Alex, you and Anthony have done a really good job, and even going back to last year, of documenting the tarnishes on the resume of former Giants offensive line coach Hal Hunter. And I think that the upgrade to Mark Colombo and the upgrade to Jason Garrett, who's clearly coached very talented players in the offensive line, but I think that there's a lot to be said from that upgrade alone. And I was as gung-ho against the Soldier signing as anybody. I've got some receipts that I've been reposting today about that in 2018. Not because I necessarily thought he was a bad player. I just thought the team was so many pieces away from winning that I thought saving money was more important and keeping the books clean. So I don't know if there's really a tackle who would necessarily start right away. Fleming's obviously an NFL caliber player. Cam Fleming, whom we just signed from Dallas, the former Patriot, who was signed in 2018 for less than Jonathan Stewart did, but that's neither here nor there. And I think with Solder and Gates there is some potential. Obviously, the wild card at center is John Jalapio going to be healthy? Is Spencer Pulley going to even make the team, or are they going to save that $2.75 million to try to move on from him? So, when it comes to trading the pick, I agree that I'd be more comfortable taking another very clean talent at tackle later in the draft, but we don't necessarily have the leverage, and the trade package that we could get isn't what we could have gotten from number 2 this year had we lost to that Washington game potentially, or in 2018 when we had number 2 overall and we had holes everywhere. So, it's hard to say. I do think that we need an offensive tackle of the future. The fact that we've gone 2 drafts and only added a 7th round pick who never played a game for us is concerning. But if this is a make or break year for Dave Gettleman, and it sounds like from Glazer it is, he probably needs somebody to show up right away, and that probably, given the way the board looks like it would be Simmons. I also want to look into what he said about talking about the depth of this year's class.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people read that into as saying, like, I'm comfortable that we can draft a tackle. And I'm hoping that he might even be thinking a dimension beyond that. Obviously, in 2018, when we signed Nate Solder, a team lost Nate Solder, and that was the Patriots. Mm-hmm. The Patriots didn't rush into to splurge, whatever they could at the position. Yes, they drafted Isaiah Wynn, and yes, he missed most of the year, if not all of the year, with his injury. But they watched the way the draft pick shook out. They saw the Raiders grabbed Colton Miller. Sorry, not the Raiders did Colton Miller. I'm confusing myself. They saw the 49ers had grabbed Mike McGlinchey. They realized McGlinchey was displacing Trent Brown, and they called to see what Trent Brown would cost them, which was like a 5th or a 6th round pick, which was not even close to what they were picking up as they kept trading down. Mm-hmm. The point is, Gettleman might realize that other teams are going to be drafting tackles and replacing their starters, and maybe he'll see a starter that somebody else will be able to pick up themselves. So there are options, and I do think that there are ways to improve the team. It's hard to see at number 4 that clean-cut value. I think number 2 has a clean-cut value pick for Washington with Chase Young.
Right.
It's with Simmons with the positional value and the depth of tackles at the start. It's hard to feel like we're going to be getting a guy at number 4 that wouldn't have been available a couple spots later.
Right, and to add on to that, considering that Gettleman has never taken an offensive lineman in general in the first round, and like you said before, he also said that this class has a ton of depth. And what that says to me is that he has no intention of drafting a tackle at the 4th overall pick. Because if you have a deep tackle class for a guy who's never actually drafted an offensive lineman in the first round. That screams to be another scenario where they're going to be like, okay, we'll take Simmons, wait to the second round. We have the 36 overall pick in the second round, and let's take our tackle. If a guy like Ezra Cleveland is close by, trade up and snag him, or, wait for another option. And, Gettleman is the type of guy who he loves his hog mollies, and he knows how to evaluate them at a very high level, and we've seen that with Carolina in the past. I mean, the highest offensive lineman he's ever picked was Will Hernandez, and he was from UTEP, like a no-name school. So that only says, everything you need to know about how he drafts and what he's going to be looking for, in this offensive line class. But, I'm interested to see, Mike, what do you think? I know you like Andrew Thomas a lot, but do you think they only, snag him as in a trade back scenario, or do they draft him at number 4?
Well, look, considering who our GM is, doesn't really trade back. I mean, I think he could be the pick of number 4, but as I've said in another video, like, the Giants don't do what I want them to do ever, so I don't see that happening. I think it's either Isaiah Simmons or Tristan Wirfs. I really don't see it going any other way. I mean, I could be wrong about it, obviously, but maybe Derek Brown, some people have talked about. I saw some Twitter source today was like, oh, the Giants are very high on Derek Brown, but it wasn't like a legitimate account. So, I really have no idea where to go with it, but I would like them to trade back. Obviously, if you can get another third-round pick out of that would be tremendous. So, that's basically what I want to happen.
So I just want to make a point on what you're saying about Gettleman highlighting the depth of this tackle class. If you remember last year, he actually highlighted the depth of the position of another position group in the draft, and that was a cornerback position. And, of course, he ended up getting Julian Love, who was listed as a cornerback, and Corey Ballantyne with a 6th-round pick. But we also picked the first cornerback off the board in trading up for DeAndre Baker. So I don't necessarily think liking the depth is a referendum on taking a guy early at the tackle position. I also, right now, outside of Gates, who might very well transition to center, as you mentioned, we have only one tackle under contract in 2021, and that's a very cuttable contract of Nate Solder. So we could need more than one piece in that.
For sure. And Anthony, I want to give you a chance now.
So I am still on the Isaiah Simmons hype train. I would like to see him taken in the first round. I don't necessarily think it has to be at number 4. If they can trade back 1 or 2 spots and get him there, I'd be all for that. I do think that there is a way to get an offensive tackle in the 2nd, 3rd round and get a lot of value there. I think that Simmons is kind of one of those prospects that you can't exactly just skip over. I think you got to take him. This defense just has so many holes all over it, and we don't have a real impact player. And I see Isaiah Simmons being the guy that could potentially change our defense. And I know that Martinez was signed, but the way that I see it is Martinez is strictly like a run-stuffing middle linebacker. I don't see him being able to keep up with tight ends and cover slot receivers if he needs to. And I think that's where you can fit Simmons right in and really complete this defense that we've been building. And obviously, as Will mentioned, we did invest a lot into the secondary last year. And one thing of note is, obviously, he mentioned the depth of the secondary, Gettleman did, and then he traded up to get a cornerback at the end of the first round. And I could honestly see them doing something similar with the offensive line this year, since there are some prospects that might fall into the second round, but we can't really guarantee that. I wouldn't be against trading up into the back end of the first round, maybe with the Seahawks once again, since they had a report today saying that they wanted to trade out of the first round once again. I wouldn't be upset with that at all. And another thing of note, when you do trade into the first round, which was a really important part of the DeAndre Baker trade, you get that 5th-year option on the contract, where you don't get that with the second-round pick. And I thought that was really important for the Baker pick, because sometimes it takes cornerbacks a very long time to develop. And I think that would also be the case if you drafted an offensive tackle who might not even be starting year 1, because we do have the likes of Nate Solder and Cameron Fleming.
Right. And I agree with you. They could look to trade back up into the first round, but there's so much talent in the second round this year. I don't think it would be wise to do it now, because, comparing this year's defense to last year, we're looking at the cornerback and the secondary as a whole. They have to take a step up. At least we hope they will, based on the simple fact that they have that experience. DeAndre Baker, he looked better towards the end of the year in 2019. And, he struggled the first half, and that was really the biggest concern, is can he hold down that number 1 corner role? And we know that obviously they don't think he can, because they went out and signed James Bradberry. And, today Gettleman even said, we're thrilled with those 3 signings that they made: Bradberry, Martinez and Fackrell. So I think they knew they needed to upgrade the defense, which means that they might still be on that same boat. And like Anthony said, they could go after Simmons there because it seems like they're very focused on that defensive unit. But at the same time, you got to protect Daniel Jones. They're kind of in the same position as the Jets right now. They have to protect their franchise quarterback and open up holes for Saquon Barkley, because if you don't invest, and I know that, Will, this is kind of referring back to what you were saying, you don't invest a second-round pick at a running back position, if you're not going to give the running back everything that you can, and you're not going to invest a 6th overall pick on a quarterback, if you're not going to give him everything that you can, and that's where the offensive line really comes into play here. They would be doing themselves a disfavor if they didn't get an offensive tackle this year.
I think the thing that stuck out to me in the quotes today was that, like, he basically threw Nate Solder under the bus in a way. He was kind of like, yeah, Nate struggled last year. He'd be the first one to admit it, all that stuff. But, like, last year, we didn't hear too much of that. It was like, yeah, Nate Solder's a guy. We're not really trying to upgrade there. But this year, he's kind of leaving that door open, which I find interesting. I mean, people want to talk about the offensive tackle having depth quote, but then we have the Nate Solder definitely struggled last year quote. So that's the one I look at and say, well, I mean, there's no guarantee he's the guy next year. I think he left that door open for sure to definitely take that offensive tackle in the first round.
Yeah, I definitely think he did, but another point that I want to mention is in 2018, I think that we could take a similar approach because we did take that can't-miss prospect with the second pick in Saquon Barkley, whether that was the right pick or not. I'm sure we discussed that earlier, but we could go Simmons early, and then in the second round of that 2018 draft, we had Will Hernandez fall to us, and I think we're all in agreement that that was a pretty great pick, and we see a lot of potential with him as a starting left guard for the next maybe decade if he can pan out, and I think that would be another route to take this year, basically repeat history, get that stud early in the first round, and then get that top offensive lineman prospect in the second round. And I think that's the route that I'm leaning in. I know a lot of people on Twitter are. It's just I get what Mike is saying at the same time, that the talent discrepancy is quite significant between a Jedrick Wills and an Austin Jackson.
Yeah, I think when I'm looking at what the Giants did this offseason as a whole, I think, frankly, it validated a lot of my concerns with some of the financial, the financial burdens that we've taken on over the past few years that didn't really have the upside. I mean, obviously, we've been 5-11 and 4-12, so it's hard to say we really needed anybody, and that we're that much better than we would have been without them. But I look at the money we didn't save by letting Eli go last year, the contract we gave Golden Tate, and even trading for Leonard Williams, which outside of the very, very questionable, to be generous, use of assets, people don't even talk about the fact that we didn't have any money to fit Leonard Williams in for the end of last year. So the way they did that was they added $1 million to dead money for Red Ellison, who isn't even with the team anymore. So we're paying him an extra $1 million not to be with the team, then we'd have to. So it's $1 million, so it's not the end of the world in the salary cap. It's 0.5%. It's about a quarter of what the average player on the roster is. But these mistakes add up, and even by creating all this space, you saw what happened, how quickly that space disappeared, and where'd it go? I mean, they found Blake Martinez to replace Alec Ogletree. They found Fackrell to replace Kareem Martin. They found Bradbury to replace Shaq Rabbit. They found Fleming to replace Remmers. Like, there isn't that much, clear. There's not really anything that you can point to and say that's a clear upgrade. I mean, Colt McCoy may be an upgrade over 39-year-old Eli Manning. Just kidding for any E-hives out there, but. But it's not like they've added the dog that Michael Strahan was talking about. This is what this team really needs, especially on defense. Do I think the defensive personnel looks better than last year? I do, and I think that mostly comes from the development of young guys who are already on the roster. Right. I think year 2 DeAndre Baker is going to be a lot better than year 1 DeAndre Baker. Mm-hmm. I do think that that coaching is going to play a lot into that too, and I know that the expectations are really high for Patrick Graham. But I do think that there is that. This is the guy that we need to stop him from taking our game plan away from us, who's lacking. And obviously, it doesn't look like Chase Young is going to be that guy. So I have a really hard time seeing how it's somebody who's not Isaiah Simmons. So, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying about, making sure that you're capitalizing on Saquon and Daniel Jones, and you've got to put those pieces around him. But as much as you got to support him with the OL, you got to support him with the defense that gets off the field. It's really hard to be able to commit to the run when the defense can let up 14 points really quickly. So, I think defense needs a big defense is still the biggest hole. 2017, 2018, 2019, they went offense with their first pick. Same with 2015, same with 2014, same with 2013, same with 2012. I want to say if that was a David Wilson year. So I mean, it's been a
Yeah.
lot of offense first. So I feel like the defense is due. So I'm still saying, if I'm a betting man, I'm going Simmons as the first pick.
Yeah, and talking about money, I wonder if Joe Judge really came in and made a difference there, because we're seeing a lot of these contracts are looking a lot better than they were, and a lot of players that they would have signed before, like Jonathan Stewart and Kareem Martin, these guys that
My buddy.
wanted. That's what I'm saying. Like these guys that you see and suddenly they're gone, and you forget they're on the team. Like I bet most people don't even realize that Kareem Martin was on the Giants last year, and we were paying him a boatload of money. So factoring in those contracts and looking at what we've done this offseason, I think the players that they've signed are actually going to contribute, and that has to be something to do with Joe Judge. Most of these deals are 3 years with front-loaded money, and then the last year is pretty much they can cut and walk away, and hopefully they're in a winning scenario and they can either extend or use that money for an elite pass rusher, win now moves. And that's kind of what we're going toward here, is that they need to be in good salary cap space and standing, and with the salary cap actually set to expand pretty significantly over the next few years, it's going to be interesting to see how they manage this salary cap situation. But like you said, the defense is still in need of a lot of talent. And so was the offensive line, especially at the tackle position, especially with Nate Solder pretty much, gone in 2021. His cap hit's going to be very minimal. They're probably just going to get rid of him, especially if he struggles this year. I always like to give him that benefit of the doubt, because last year, his kid has cancer, and dealing with that entire scenario is really difficult. And I want to give him sympathy and give him an extra year just to go out and prove to us, that he was dealing with some stuff. And I understand that. Like I can't imagine going through something like that. So I want to give him the benefit of the doubt for 2020. But the reality is, NFL's a business, and if he's not making the team money, essentially, because if the team is bad, people aren't showing up to the games, people aren't watching and tuning into the games as much. Ultimately, that hurts the team and the business in general. So hopefully he can bounce back and show us that he's worthy. But again, his cap hit is crazy the next 2 years. I think it's like in 2021, what is it, like $19.5 million or something like that?
Yeah,
Something like that.
I think so, and I've got to check it back. So let's see, it's $62 million. The deal is, I think, 4 years, 62 in total. It's 19.5 this year. It's 27 until then, so that's 46. So I think it's another 16. I think last year. If it's 19 this year, that might be wrong. It might be 19 next year. Sorry, but yeah, it's certainly up there. And it's really hard. So I'm gonna throw out a stat that I kind of put together in my head a few weeks ago that I think really drives home why I think, not necessarily that there's another player that should have been picked over Barkley, but why accumulating draft capital was so important in 2018. Dalvin Tomlinson is our only starter on defense who was with the team before Gettleman arrived. Outside of Dalvin Tomlinson, unless you're going to count Lorenzo Carter and B.J. Hill as true starters, which I believe in them, and I think, but they do have something to prove before they get that tag. We don't have a single starter who was here before the 2019 draft on defense. I mean, think
That's
about
crazy.
that. Like, if we didn't have to sell Odell for parts because we realized how much of a mistake we'd made trying to win now, who would be our starters on defense? Who would be our best player on defense? Like, it's alarming. And so, I think defense really, really needs some love. And, it's going to be a while to get those pieces that'll make us the bully that we were in Super Bowl 42, if anyone saw that on TV yesterday.
Of course.
But I'm really hoping that that starts soon, because the Giants I grew up watching were built on the defensive side of the ball.
Speaking of that Odell trade, did them taking Dexter Lawrence at 17 annoy you in a way, because that's not really like a positional value type pick where you take a basically run stuffer with some minor, pass rushing upside? Would you take that 17th overall, or is that like a mistake in your mind?
I really don't try to judge, college players and scout college players themselves and like try to judge their, transition to the pros. I think a lot of guys who put a lot more time in than I do that, and they still get a lot wrong. And I just think that that's not where my skill set lies. I will say that in March of 2019, I might have been one of the very, very few Giants fans, I can speak to a couple others, who absolutely abhorred Dave Gettleman, but thought the Odell Beckham trade was a very prudent win. Not against Odell, the player, at all. I just said, what's the upside with him on the team this year, next year, et cetera, et cetera. And if we pick up some draft capital who are going to be contributing at cheap contracts in 2021 and 22, that'll give us a head start in being less less irrelevant, I think is the word I was looking for, sooner rather than later. So I didn't mind picking Dexter. I've seen that, what big bully defensive tackles can do. I mean, you see what Ndamukong Suh has done and how guys who play next to Suh continue to lead the league in sacks. You saw what Aaron Donald's done for the Rams. So if Gettleman really had faith in his hog molly, I didn't mind that. It's just when it's like the fifth or sixth investment in the defensive tackle in a row that I start to scratch my head a little bit. But no, I didn't have any problem with Dexter Lawrence, and I do get the sense that had what's his name, Brian Burns, right, who went to Carolina right before him.
Yeah,
I think if Burns had been on the board, he would have been a Giant.
would have been a tremendous pick too. It's a shame.
He had quite a year last year.
You're right. I really liked Dexter Lawrence, though. I think it's going to be interesting to see this year is really what's going to tell us if that OBJ trade was worth it. Because, Dexter Lawrence looked great, but O'Shane Ximines is the guy I'm looking at because that's the guy, that no one's really talking about, and he could be their, premier pass rusher. That's what they're hoping he can be. I mean, I think he had 4.5 sacks last year on like 45% of defensive snaps. So it's really... relying on him exploding this season, especially because it doesn't seem like, or at least Gettleman made it seem like, that they're not going after Marcus Golden and they're not in the chase for Jadeveon Clowney. So they're sticking with a schemed pass rush with Fackrell, who had 10.5 sacks in 2018. And then, you have O'Shane Ximines and Lorenzo Carter. Those are basically their three guys that are going to be rotating around. So Ximines needs to, explode onto the scene and really show us that he can be that guy to rack up, double-digit sacks every year. And if he ends up being that good, you have Dexter Lawrence, Jabril Peppers, and O'Shane Ximines from the OBJ. I'm saying that's a win every single day. Because right now, OBJ on the Giants, they're still a losing team. They needed to get those youth players in place so that they could really build around and build a foundation that was good for the future. And that's really what we're looking at now. We're looking at to see if that foundation is cemented or if it's still loose and they need to supplement that weakness.
It's true though, because Odell was putting up 1,300, 1,400 yards, and the team is still going 6-10. And I love Odell as much as anybody, so I'll come to his defense. But honestly, having him here, what would have been last year, or even the upcoming season, would make no sense because even if you kept Odell, you might be 7-9 instead of 5-11. So it just makes
still
no
losing.
sense to keep him here. Yeah, you're better off taking those younger guys and. I love Ximines. I think this year he can be like an 8-9, maybe 10 sack guy. I hope he starts. I'm tired of seeing the Lorenzo Carter experiment. I think he's more of a rotational player. I want to see Ximines play more. So hopefully it's more Fackrell, Ximines, and hopefully those guys are the starters next year.
Yeah, I think they should try Lorenzo Carter at inside linebacker. I think that he's definitely shown some flashes in coverage to me.
An inside linebacker.
I've seen other people
if they don't go
about
Simmons.
That.
Yeah,
I feel like that might be easier, especially if in a 3-4 than in a 4-3, especially now that Martinez is on the team and they just re-signed David Mayo for not a.
I think Connolly's that
insignificant guy. And we've certainly we've got Connolly as well, the point I wanted to make on the Odell thing is being in favor of trading him. I feel like Giants fans have been really fickle recently, and there's been some behavior I really hate, directed at Odell, directed at Landon Collins, guys who I feel like wanted nothing more than to win in Giants blue and really, busted their tail to try to do that. I don't think Odell is not a winner. I think that's silly. My first 2 years of being a fan, 95 and 96, the Giants were a combined 11 and 21. Michael Strahan was not a loser. Michael Strahan was a player playing on a bad team. I don't think that's an indictment of a player by himself. The point that I really liked about that trade that not a lot of people think about. I mean, people still think Odell's a young player. He's in his 6th or 7th year. But Odell Beckham, at the time he was traded, or at least at the time the league year started, I don't remember exactly what the stat was older than Hakeem Nicks, Steve Smith, and Victor Cruz. And there may have been one other guy that I'm forgetting. All of them when they started to taper off from their career peaks as Giants. So he's not. Wide receiver is a position that disappears really quickly. And as much as people were saying that this is the riskiest move Gettleman's ever done, I take the complete opposite side of that. I think it was a very risk-averse move to be able to have more bullets to throw at pieces that could be a part of the solution. I do think it was a move for the better. I'm not sure that it was necessarily the wrong moves for the Browns. I think the Browns have made some other mistakes, but I think it was a move that made the Giants closer to where they need to be.
Right. And, like you said before, there's no way that I can't believe people actually think that OBJ isn't a winner. You know, that's crazy to me because the reality is he might have been a crazy nutcase on the sideline, but that guy wanted to win more than anyone I've ever seen. You know, that kind of passion and that kind of, tenacity doesn't come with losers. You know, that guy's pacing on the sideline at 3-10 in the cold because he wants to win. And, even though he kicked a kicking net and then married it later, the reality is, you can be crazy and still want to win. Antonio Brown, even Terrell Owens, those guys are all winners, but they're nuts. And, that's kind of where Giants fans get a little confused at times. We just don't want crazy players, and we try to avoid that madness because New York is dangerous, a hostile place. The media will rip people apart, and that's the biggest thing. You got to remember that these guys are human beings, and the stuff that they take, and they're watching, they're on social media. How do you think Eli survived all this time? He just didn't have a social media. He doesn't have Instagram, doesn't have Twitter. He stays out of it. And the only reason he's mentally sane, and if you look at him and you hear him speak, he's mentally sane because he stays out of the media. And all these players, these younger players coming in, look at Daniel Jones, he's not on there either. If you look at all these younger players that are on there, they're in for some trouble. If they start playing poorly, they're watching and they're gonna feel the pressure, and that's kind of what OBJ was feeling. I think he was just driving himself crazy because he's very active on social media, and it's really crazy when you think about it how influential it actually can be.
Well, I'll say I was a big Dwayne Haskins guy going into last year's draft. But that was the one thing that I could not stand about Dwayne Haskins was that he is such a social media guy, and he's always posting everything he does. He's got an Instagram account for his dogs, and he's always talking to fans and responding to trash talkers. And Daniel Jones had no social media, and that was one of the things that I really liked about him. So that's just I agree with that. It's definitely a character thing and a focus and attention more towards football than fame. And it can obviously get in your head once you have all these trash talkers. I feel like we've seen that with Haskins a bit. And I wasn't a huge Daniel Jones guy coming out, although I don't think I hate him as much as other people did. But that's definitely one of the things that I really liked about him was the Eli personality of not being on social media the way that some of these other prospects kind of make fame and money off of social media.
Yeah, the one point I wanted to make about what you, Alex, was saying about Odell not being a winner, I think, obviously I've documented some of my frustrations with Gettleman in terms of, some of the moves he's made and some of his football ideas. But I have some issues with him and the way he conducts himself as a man. I think he's been hypocritical. He's walked back his words, and I think he's been very childish with the way he's treated some of his former players. And clearly, I'm not the only one. But one thing I'll point to specifically is in his first press conference, if you remember, he said, "I don't want guys who love to play football. I want guys who hate to lose." And I think that Odell and Landon were the two guys who really hated to lose more than anybody on the team. And I think, I've said this line before. I think there's a fine line between composure and complacency. And I think that they clearly erred on one side of the line. And I'm not sure that it's necessarily the right thing. Obviously Eli and Odell are on very different spectrums of that composure and complacency. Sorry. I do think that, we got guys who love playing football and who are happy to say the right things to not rock the boat. And I think that, that's very contradictory. I mean, you got to look at, in Gettleman's press conference recently, he said, part of the problem here is we don't have guys who are veteran New York Giants. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at what he did with the veteran New York Giants when he got here. I was always very much in support of the JPP trade. I thought that started the teardown of bloated contracts and started getting towards the youth movement. Of course, going right back and trading for Alec Ogletree, I think kind of washed that. But it's hard to have it both ways.
No, you're right. It's really hard to have it both ways. And some of the contracts that we've seen have certainly been questionable at best. And I am on the boat that is thinking Joe Judge is going to have a significant influence in what goes on moving forward because he has a modernized approach. And John Mara said they're trying to modernize. And Gettleman is an old horse trying to lead young guys on social media with personalities. I don't think those two things mesh at all. I think you need a guy like Joe Judge to come in and institute a new set of rules, a disciplinary mindset, mentality, and come in with a leadership mentality. Coming in and he's going to say, you guys aren't allowed to do all the things you've been doing. Pat Shurmur just didn't come off to me as the type of guy I would respect in a locker room or in a huddle. You know what I mean? I don't know why, but and he's a really good offensive coordinator. But he was all over the place as a head coach. He just didn't seem like he had a grasp on every single unit. Joe Judge is one of those guys coming as a special teams coordinator, right? And as a special teams coordinator, you need to know everything about the offense and defense because you have both types of players in that unit, and he was the wide receivers coach for New England last year. So he's coming with a ton of knowledge and experience working with both sides of the ball. And that's what I like about him. They usually say, not a lot of special teams coordinators are being promoted to head coach. And Bill Belichick is like, I think they should be more frequently because he knows everything about both sides. And I think that's where he is. He's kind of impartial. And he's not leaning an offensive direction or leaning a defensive direction. He's right smack in the middle. And he's like, I want my offensive coordinators to do their job. I don't want Mike Shula sitting in the background picking his ass, feeding Pat Shurmur, trick plays. Because we're 3-10 again, and we don't have anything to show for it. I'm tired of these Sterling Shepard end arounds because we have nothing else to do, and we're
hold
running
on
the
a second.
same
I'm
routes.
gonna have to jump in on that and say that my biggest problem with Kevin Gilbride is we didn't run end arounds until week 16 of every year. For the same reason. So I think actually running an end around is great. I'm pretty sure that I know your point is bigger than the end around specifically, but
Of course.
I think in general, keeping defenders off balance. Like, I think the Giants had a big disadvantage for years, especially under Coughlin, in that when Eli would hand it off, basically defense is like, oh, no counter coming, everybody could overcommit. And I think one of the reasons that the Patriots have had so much success, it's reason after reason after reason with these guys, and obviously trading down is one of my favorites, but it's not just 4th and 1 they do QB sneaks. It's 4th and 1 before the defense is even ready. They don't wait for the play to be called. They catch it with tempo when the defense is off bounds. That's the part that really excites me about Joe Judge. I feel like players are going to say, okay, when we get in this situation, we're going to be prepared because we'll have talked about that. We'll know what to do. The Do Your Job documentary, when they talk about Malcolm Butler, this is the look that they throw at you, and this is the way that you're going to play it, and you can overcommit because this is you'll have help. We'll be prepared. And I think that this is going to be unlike any regime the Giants have ever had. I also thought, McAdoo to Shurmur was going to be a big upgrade. So, I'll call myself out for that receipt. But I will say that I'm elated with the Joe Judge hire. I think we went outside the box in finding some guy. We didn't just hire a guy who was going to be written up as a win like Matt Rule. Nothing against Matt Rule, but I think we weren't trying to win the headline. We were trying to get the coach. And I'm so excited about what we did.
Yeah, and John Mara said that. He was like, Joe Judge walked in the room and he interviewed with us, and he was it. We didn't even bother to interview anybody else. So we closed the door right then and there. We said, Matt, you can come through, but we're already hiring Joe Judge. And he was like, all right, screw it, I'm going to Carolina. And that's really like why I'm so happy with this, is because I know what he's bringing, and that's the experience with Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. You don't get that kind of guy very often. And people are always trying to say, New England coaches, coordinators going to other teams, I always struggle, this and that. I just like, you have to take that with a grain of salt because it's such a small sample size at the same time. We're talking about a guy like Joe Judge who is his own person, his own personality, learned from Saban as well at the collegiate level. And he's building a really good foundation. And I think it was Phil Simms who said like 2 days ago, he said, I haven't really talked to that many people on the Giants side of things yet, but the one person I spoke to said Joe Judge is making changes and he's doing the right thing. And to hear it from Phil Simms, I want to believe it. I really do. And
I'm excited about that. The thing that I'm still kind of disappointed in is they don't have a GM I like still, and some of the players might be an issue because we don't really have talent that these other teams have that are going to be playoff teams. You look at the playoff teams last year, I don't think the Giants are on that level still, even adding Martinez and Bradbury and guys like that. And
remember, 7 teams this year.
Yeah, we have had a
true.
chance for sure. Yeah, but still, I think they're like 1/3 of the way there. I like the coach they have in place. I like a lot of the coaches they have in place right now, but the talent, the GM still might be an issue for me. So I'm not all the way there. I don't really expect them to, make this giant jump next year. No pun intended, but we'll see what happens.
I think they need to be more patient with Joe Judge because
Yeah.
obviously I think we were all in agreement that we had to get rid of Pat Shurmur and Ben McAdoo when we did. But I think that if the tables start to turn, if the fan base starts to turn on Joe Judge, the ownership needs to stand firm and keep him around and keep his vision because we're all very confident in him now, and losing obviously can waver confidence very quickly, especially when you lose a lot, and you have been losing a lot like we have been. But I think that it's more of a long-term chess match with Joe Judge. We could definitely debate Dave Gettleman and how long he should still be here for, but I think with Joe Judge, I want to see him finish his contract, even if it doesn't go the way we want it to, and they don't extend him after this contract. I want to see him play out the whole thing.
He should get 4 years minimum, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. And I personally, when Saquon Barkley was selected in April of 2018, one of the things I said is, you know what's kind of sad about this? I don't think Pat Shurmur is going to have a chance to win or lose. And I do think that Shurmur failed. And I don't think that, Shurmur, there's any reason that Shurmur needed more time. But I do think that better coaches would have also failed because I don't think he was set up with the tools he had to win. One thing that I think might be interesting, and I've kind of come around to this take, I guess we can call it. What if Gettleman? I think we should talk about as the next segment maybe is how do we evaluate Dave Gettleman, because he didn't take a win now approach this year. So it's not just wins and losses that really indicate how much of a better job he does this year than he did in 2018. But what if they just kept Gettleman around to give kind of Joe Judge that fullback, that lightning rod of saying, okay, here's somebody we can throw to the wolves now, if this isn't going as quickly as possible. Because I completely agree with you. I think Joe Judge needs his time. He's not responsible for the roster that he inherited, the roster that had one defensive starter, as I said, from before the 2019 season started. So the roster that's has the fifth or sixth lowest win total in Vegas. So how would you evaluate Gettleman? What would make you think that he did a good job this year when you look back at this a year from now?
Well, looking at Gettleman is really hard, like you said, because we have to factor in the concept that he decided that they were going to win while they rebuilt. And then he decided they were going to scratch that. We messed up. That's wrong. We're going to restart again. And that leads me back to John Mara, and it pisses me off so much because while, I respect and I appreciate everything that the Maras have done, John Mara
I'm
is
just going to plug in my phone.
Mara is extremely biased. And that is, Dave Gettleman was a part of the Giants years ago, and he's a friend of Mara, so Mara doesn't feel like he wants to fire him. But I do agree, Gettleman is now the scapegoat. Gettleman is now on the line. If they don't perform the way that they should in 2020, he's gone, in my opinion. And Joe Judge is going to be kept for at least a few years, and I think that's really a really smart thing to do, like Anthony said. But evaluating Gettleman at this point, I really think it takes 2020. I really need to see the secondary and the foundation that he's laid on defense come to fruition. If it doesn't look as good as we need it to, the evaluation should be self-explanatory. But right now, I think it's too early because he started so late with a new rebuild.
My opinion, I thought he should have been gone before, during this off season, and it really depends how these young guys develop. I mean, Will Hernandez and Lorenzo Carter, Oshane Ximines, Dexter Lawrence, of course, Daniel Jones is a big one as well. He kind of needs Saquon Barkley to have his, a rookie-type year once again next year. That'd be big for him. But I just don't – I think Gettleman's made too many mistakes so far. You look at these other teams and what they've done with even trading down and getting value. I mean, we traded a third-round and a fourth-rounder for Leonard Williams, but then you see Jarrell Casey get traded for like a sixth-round pick or whatever it is. And you're like, well, why can't we make a trade close to that? Or Calais Campbell or, something like that. Like, why aren't we getting these great values in trades? I know those are veteran players, but, still, those are – probably better players than Leonard Williams right now. So, there's been too many questionable moves in my mind. The free agency stuff has not been too good. This has been my favorite Gettleman free agency class so far, so I have to say I like that. But you think back to, your guy Jonathan Stewart and then Patrick Omameh and Connor Barwin and then the two safeties with Buffet and Curtis Riley. Like, you couldn't sign another guy like Trey Boston was out there. Like, what made you choose, Buffet over a guy like Trey Boston? Like, some of these moves have to be in question for sure.
I almost forgot about Curtis Riley, so thank you so much for reminding me of him.
So, but that you're touching on another issue. I never bash Gettleman for not being a good scout. He's got a resume better than almost anybody in the league in terms of being a scout. But, you're talking about other guys he could have signed. Darian Thompson's, in the league, doing well. He just
Starting
got
for
re-signed by
Dallas.
Dallas. He's been doing fine. He was on the roster. Andrew Adams was on the roster. He's been picked up by a couple teams since then. Why pay Curtis Riley instead of using, one of the few positions where you do have a serviceable player? I mean, I'm not saying, everybody needed to be kept, but, Romeo Okwara was here for like $500K, a depth piece for $500K. You don't cut a guy like that to bring in somebody else who can't play. It's just bad resource allocation. So I think it's really tough, and I do think you're talking to the specific development of some players. If you remember last year, John Maris said that he'd evaluate 2019 and judge Gettleman largely on 3 players specifically: Will Hernandez, Lorenzo Carter, and B.J. Hill. Hernandez regressed. Carter didn't show much. Certainly fell short of the expectations we set. And B.J. Hill, they spent a 3rd-round pick to put somebody to take his snaps. I mean, it's I love B.J. Hill, so I don't want to talk poorly about the guy, but it's hard to see how, based on the expectations the team has set for themselves, we've come anywhere close to achieving those goals.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. No, you're right. You're 100% right, because, like you said, all these draft picks have regressed in year 2, and that is a huge sign of poor drafting in general. And that's why this latest draft class, we had 3 first-round picks, right? 3 first-round picks with Baker, Dexter Lawrence, and Daniel Jones. We saw some good stuff, but year 2, now we're going to see if they regress or not. We're going to see if they pull a Lorenzo Carter,
Kelvin Benjamin,
or a B.J. Hill. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to see
Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, we're going to see if all these things, and these players take a step forward or a step back, and that's very, very reliant on the coaches. And Joe Judge even said, one of my favorite things that Joe Judge said is, we're not signing players to coach younger players. I hate that concept. Why are you signing Antoine Bethea to suck in the defensive secondary, but to help DeAndre Baker at cornerback? He's not even a cornerback. You know what I mean? Like, that's. It's and I'm sure I've said things in the past that may be counter to what I've just said, but the reality stands now is after seeing what happened, and having some time to think about it and seeing how these draft picks develop and how he drafted, we need to see positive progress. We can't see, and the coaches have to do their jobs. They got to be coaches. They can't be relying on the players to do it for them.
My question for you guys right now is, no explanation. Like, what would be your record for the 2020 Giants before the draft even happens? I know it's a pointless question, but what would be your records right now for this team?
Like prediction, or what would be? Okay, 6-10.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I think I was gonna go the same thing.
You think we're gonna play 16 games this year, huh?
There you go.
I'm hoping and praying, man. I don't know what I'll do if we don't have football.
One thing people are forgetting that's scaring me about the coronavirus is I'm worried Brett Bielema is not going to get his next job. But no, nice. I'd say 6-10 sounds about right. I think we're going to be a little bit better than next year. We're going to have a harder schedule than next year, and we're going to have a lot better coaching. So, a few things break our way. I think one issue that I think is going to be really cleaned up is the kicking game. I was, people called me crazy for how much I was saying Diassi couldn't snap at the beginning of the year last year. And then all of a sudden people are like, how is a long snapper actually washed up? I mean, obviously Diassi is one of the best Giants of my lifetime, but he was a real liability. And I don't think the casual fan really understood that. And I think Rosas got a lot of negativity for situations that weren't all his fault. And Rosas, by the way, is probably the best kickoff specialist right now in the NFL. I mean, he doesn't let teams get touchbacks and they start inside their 25. So that's great. So I think with a special teams coach who's really focused to that, I'm really excited about that unit. So I think 6-10, 7-9. I don't think playoffs are necessarily what's going to happen. I do think Washington's going to be better too. So I think we might have lost 2 of our quite as cupcake wins, but I think 6-10 sounds about right.
Yeah, and like you said with the long snapping position, we just interviewed Casey Kreider, our new long snapper, and he was a Pro Bowler 2 years ago. And he was saying, I love Diassi, but I'm happy that he's gone because it opened up an opportunity for me, and I'm so excited to play in Giants blue. And that's all I really wanted to hear, is he's excited and he's a talented player. But like you said, Diassi wasn't the same, and he's one of the best Giants of my lifetime as well. And he had injuries last year, and you could see there were some snaps that were not good, and they, in the dirt, bouncing around, missing, not great to the punter either. So hopefully Kreider can come in here and turn that around, and Rosas can get back to his Pro Bowl self. But I'm excited. This kicking is really important, and the NFL has struggled in the past few years with kicking, and we've seen the results, and they have not been pretty.
I think something that people aren't talking about enough is that the combination of Joe Judge, Casey Kreider, a former Pro Bowler, Aldrick Rosas, a former Pro Bowler, and Riley Dixon, someone with Pro Bowl potential, we do have the potential to have the best special teams in the NFL by far, and that can win or lose you some games. And Cody Core as well, he looked excellent. We signed Nate Ebner. There's no reason for our special teams not to be amongst the top 5 in the NFL this year.
Do we still have that Antonio Hamilton guy, or is he gone? I forget.
He's on the Chiefs now.
Yeah, he's gone.
Okay.
But we kept Cody Core.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
And we got Nate Ebner.
So who's your pick, I guess, for the breakout giant of 2020? The guy that you think is going to, I guess I'll say who do you want and who do you think is going to be that guy who, we'll look back and say wow, I really couldn't see that one coming, or yeah.
I'll say I want Nick Gates, and I think there's a good chance it is Nick Gates. But I'd say if I have to bet on somebody, it's going to be DeAndre Baker, just because he was, as a rookie, really disappointing last season. And I thought, from my point of view, and I'm not really a film expert, but from my point of view, it was a lot on the coaching staff. Putting DeAndre Baker in zone, not letting him press when what he's best at is man coverage and pressing, and he really barely got to do that sometimes, playing 12 yards off the line of scrimmage on 3rd and 4 and letting Cole Beasley pick up an easy slant. That will still haunt me next year. But I think that just because we got a better coaching staff in place, and they've put a huge emphasis so far in the media about making players play to their strengths, that's the player that I really want to see play to his strengths, because I feel like we didn't see it last year. And once he does, DeAndre Baker, I think that he can definitely take that jump and start to look like that first-round prospect that we all thought he was.
I would say for me, I think the guy that's going to break out is O'Shane Ximines, and that's a guy that I had in my Giants mock draft last year, so I hope that would make me look smart if he actually breaks out, and I think he has a lot of potential as well. So, but the guy I want to break out, after talking to him, he's such a nice guy, Julian Love. That's another guy I want to do well, obviously, and I do think he has that potential as well. So I'm looking at those two guys. Of course, there's plenty of young talent to pick on. I like the DeAndre Baker pick as well. That's a very important one for us if we're going to be successful next year.
Yeah, and just because you used 2 players, which is really annoying because I was going to use Love, I'm going to go with Corey Ballantyne, because he's one of the only other rookies that sucks, that sucked last year, that I can use. And the reason is, I think he is going to be slotted into the slot corner position, and he learned a lot last year. He learned how to get beat over and over and over again, and he learned that the NFL is no joke. But he is athletically gifted. He can keep up, physically with these guys. He just isn't. His fundamentals aren't there yet, and I think that's where coaching is going to come in. Refining those fundamentals, that mental aspect of the game. He was just coming off, his friend getting shot. Wasn't he shot in the ass too? We're talking about a guy that's coming off that kind of experience, going right into training camp. The season must not be easy after that kind of thing happening to you. So I think he's going to learn a lot. He did learn a lot, and hopefully he will break out and become that solidified slot corner, because I can't trust Grant Haley in coverage anymore.
I'll quickly say I think that Ballantyne looked better on the outside in preseason than he did on the inside in regular season. So I'm wondering if they're gonna try putting him on the outside this year.
Maybe as a reserve.
I think I always going to say Ballantyne myself, so I'm going to give you my second option. But I do think you got to remember in preseason that he's going against fourth stringers instead of first stringers. But yeah, I think. I love Corey. I love his story. I love, his energy. You always saw him pumping his fist on the sidelines. I love that pick. I'm going to go with a third-year guy on the other side of the ball, I guess, and I'm going to say Will Hernandez, the mean guy out of UTEP.
Love that guy too.
I think obviously, Solder had a really tough year last year. I don't think Jalapeno is the NFL starting center that we hoped he'd be. He's about to be 30 now. He's coming off of an injury. It's going to be really tough for him. I love his story, and I've been rooting for him since. People forget he was a Reese guy, and he was with the Patriots even before that. But Hernandez was kind of in a weird spot next to two guys who were kind of weaker units on the line. I think Zeitler was clearly the strong link. And I think with better coaching and with a better fit there, I think he can really take that next step up and be that disruptive guy for Saquon in the run game. So, let's hope it's all forward. But yeah, it's good to hear. A couple. It's good to have some young guys to be excited about. I didn't quite feel that way in 2018, so it's good to kind of have some guys with a few years under their belt.
Yeah, no, I agree. And before we wrap up here, I just want to thank you, Will, for coming on and sharing your insight because, you've been, it seems like a season ticket holder for quite a long time and a fan for quite a long time. And it's always nice to connect with other fans and really enjoy this team because losing for this many years really creates a lot of hostility. And it certainly has for me, having started covering the team about 2 years ago, starting losing consistently. It really sucks, man. It really sucks. Like, covering the team day in, day out, writing and creating content for a losing team is depressing. I just can't wait till we're a winning team. It's going to be so much more fun. And these podcasts are going to be filled with joy and happiness and beers and cheers. So I'm pretty excited for that kind of thing to happen. But thank you for coming on. I want to give you guys the last word.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Will. Always a pleasure speaking with you. I've had you on Giants Brawl before, but it was fun, and I agree, Alex. You started covering them 2 years ago, but obviously I joined Empire Sports Media about a year and a half ago, so it has been difficult to write about so much losing and so much of our depressing team over the year and a half. But I think things are looking up now. I think there's a lot of potential for the future, and I'm really excited about it, and I'm really excited for this upcoming draft. I know that we've got something special planned on the YouTube channel for that, I'm pretty sure, so
Yep.
Really excited about that too, and hoping for a good 2020 of football if we can get back on the schedule hopefully soon.
I'd love that.
Yeah, thanks to Will. I mean, I was excited to talk to you because we have a lot of similar views about Saquon Barkley and Tate Gettleman. So it was good to, we're one of the few people I feel like that have those same views. But I think more and more people are coming around to it nowadays. But I guess, we'll see how it plays out in the future. But yeah, it was fun. So thanks for coming on, and hopefully a better year in 2020, obviously.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me on. I know, it's I have been going to Giants games. I've remembered going to Giants games since the end of the '94 season, and been really following the team for a long time. I know a lot of people in my section personally, and it really does feel like a family there. It's my dad's season ticket, so I always do feel like the young guy when I go there, and it's funny to be now on the podcast and feel like the old guy, with the younger generations of fans. But that's what what being a fan is all about, we all want the same thing. I think it's really hard when you're in a situation when you don't trust the people who are being paid to do the right things to do the right things. And I think different Giants fans have had some trouble grappling with that. But I've been really impressed with the way that you've grown your network. I love some of the stuff you're putting out there. I think that there's a lot of talent on this podcast, and I can't wait to keep seeing where you guys go when the better days get here.
Absolutely. And the better days need to come fast because we're quarantined, the Giants stink, things need to turn around because it's getting pretty depressing in New York. But thanks, Will. I appreciate you coming on, and make sure to follow him on Twitter, Willie Receipts. He's always thrashing people on Twitter. It's always a fun time, a fun follow, especially when people try to respond. It's actually pretty entertaining. And to be on the other side of it where I can watch, it's way better. So,
I'll say this for myself. I don't have any problems with people being wrong and coming back and saying they were wrong. In 2017, I was telling anyone who'd listen to me that Brandon Marshall was going to be what this offense really needed.
Me too.
He would be, just having a possession receiver I thought was going to fix the offensive line by itself. I was clearly wrong. I just don't now say that, anybody who thinks, Brandon Marshall, was going to be a good pick is an idiot, which, you do see some people try to represent both sides of the coin. And I feel like, as long as you're trying to have a good conversation, I love you. It's just when, you get reporters with the blue check marks every once in a while who try to articulate a position that they themselves, rejected, not so long ago. That's when it's fun to have a some person A in 2018 versus person A in 2020 little juxtaposition. But anyway,
Absolutely.
Thanks again, guys. Stay safe, and looking forward to doing this again sometime soon.
Absolutely. And to everybody listening, stay safe out there. It's crazy. Make sure your elderly loved ones are being watched over. Coronavirus is serious. So thank you guys for listening and tuning in. We'll talk to you guys next time.